Blog Talk Radio.
Just a good-looking pair. Hello, you are listening to the Radulich Broadcasting Network. We are tonight reviewing a Netflix TV show. Yes, a Netflix show, ladies and gentlemen, and I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. Now, normally when we do these reviews, I am joined by the one and only, the inimitable Robert Winfrey. However, he did not succumb to the mass popularity that is Full House. He decided to skip this one. That is his right. We, as the vice president of the Radulich Broadcasting Network, Robert Winfrey has a lot of responsibilities, and sometimes he just can't do it. So instead, I have gone into the Wayback Machine, and I have dug up your friend and mine, the punchy pugilist. His name is Mr. Patrick Mullin. And he is bringing out his alter ego, Totally 80s Pat Mullin. Welcome to the show, Totally 80s Pat Mullin.
Thanks, Mark. I've got my VCR all programmed and set to record tonight's episode of Dallas.
You're going to finally find out who shot JR on it?
I just picked up the new cassette tape by Duran Duran.
Oh, goodness.
Something happened, though. I think they shot JR or something.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. We are, as I said before, we are reviewing Fuller House. Netflix brought Full House out of the garbage pile of television and said, we need a revival here. Netflix has given us a lot of really, really good shows. Obviously, they've brought us the Marvel shows. You have.
Well, you said really, really good, though.
Shut up, you. We've got the Marvel shows. We've got Orange is the New Black, House of Cards, Narcos. Not everything.
You got like one good show out of that whole list.
Well, I'm about to name a terrible show. Maybe you'll love it. I actually made my kids sit and watch the Netflix live-action revival of Richie Rich, which is probably going to be. I don't know if you ever saw this, but it's now my new standard for garbage television. Like, it's just like if me and you tried to do a show, I think it might look like this, on a budget of like $20. It did not give me hope that when I heard about the Full House revival, that Fuller House would be any good. And I really did attempt to avoid this whole thing, but my Facebook feed done blew up with mostly girls. I have to say, mostly girls, mostly friends of my wife who I have friended on Facebook and who have not unfriended me because of my constant advertising of my shows. They all were just the weekend shut down, and everybody was watching Fuller House. My wife has yet to watch it, but she was mad at me, Patrick Mullin, that I watched it before she got a chance to. After I had said anyone that watches Fuller House is a goddamn retard. Well, I retract those statements, ladies and gentlemen. I was wrong. Fuller House ended up being a lot better than it had any right to be. And but a man who thought, could not wait for this thing when they advertised it way back, and it was in the periodicals, and they talked about, we're bringing back Full House. Patrick Mullin, you were excited for this thing as soon as you heard about it. So just sort of open up here. Let's open up this show with you talking about your love for Full House. Where did it come from, and what did you think when you heard that they were coming back with a 2.0 version of Full House?
Well, it's funny because Full House and I are born in the same year. So go ahead and look it up and do your homework, and you'll figure out how old totally 80s Patrick Mullin really is. And it was just that constant. It was that constant show that I grew up with through my childhood. That shouldn't have been a success, but it was, based around the premise where it started off as TV's version of Three Men and a Baby, and it evolved into something more that had each of these characters with their individual traits and lives and quirks and problems and dilemmas, but ultimately revolved around the family unit staying together and holding things and solving problems together, and not always necessarily solving the problem, but coming to an understanding that problem couldn't be solved by them, and they were just going to have to hope for the best, which is a little more realistic than Full House ever really gets credit for being. And I think it's also one of those things where, because it was such, I don't want to say it was like a cult hit because it had a legitimate large following for years. So it's not the same as a cult hit in that vein of like a show that maybe lasted 1 year but has such a devoted following like a Firefly. But it was one of those shows where everybody just always tuned in and made it happen, and it was something everybody knew and loved and grew up with and always had a soft spot for, at least in my age group for the most part. And the one thing that I think bothered everybody is you never really got a legitimate finale of that series. The original series ended its run in 1995. It had a two-part, 1 hour finale where the character Michelle that made Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen famous, damn you, hit her head and got amnesia, and they weren't sure whether or not she would recover her memory, and basically ended up with them kind of with the happy ending of she did get her memory back, and the family will always stay together to help each other out. They got offered a deal to come on to the WB the following year, which at the time was not fully nationally syndicated. The WB Warner Brothers network, which now is, of course, half of the CW network, was getting most of its syndication through WGN based out of Chicago. So because of that, John Stamos was the first one who was the main star of the show and really the draw for, women. And he was, even in his, 30s, and even now, the guy's still a freaking teen idol. So, but he was the first one to say, I'm really not interested in doing a carry-on where it's not going to be national syndication and we're going to have to go try to sell the show in markets. And once that happened, really the rest of the cast followed suit. And so you never got that end, that real true end of the show. And most of the actors went on to do other things, some more prevalent than others. Stamos has always kept pretty busy and always has something going on. Bob Saget went back to his very filthy stand-up comedy roots, where if you only knew him as Danny Tanner, boy, were you in for a surprise when you saw him after.
His big stand-up post Full House was hilarious and frightening all at the same time. I mean, he really does say, if you were expecting Danny Taylor, boy, are you in for a fucking surprise?
Yeah, and whoever wants to question Bob Saget's acting range, please listen to any one of his stand-up specials and watch him play Danny Tanner on Full House. That's range, ladies and gentlemen. Okay?
Yeah.
And, I guess really of the two, the ones that kept acting the most, obviously besides the Olsen twins, were John Stamos and his on-screen wife, Lori Loughlin, who always seemed to find themselves in some kind of series or television movies constantly. But everybody else kind of went their own ways, but you never had them, with the exception of those two, really, in a big high-profile role back on TV, although they remained fan favorites.
I was going to say,
so this was kind of...
Candace Cameron did a lot of television. She remained very active.
She did certain things. I don't remember her in a ton. She would do an occasional guest spot here or there. The one thing I remember her doing was a movie where Fred Savage was her boyfriend who beat and eventually murdered her, which was really, really dark for somebody who grew up on the Wonder Years and Full House.
Yeah, she's one of those. She's one of those like Valerie Bertinelli, who basically made a career to the point where Family Guy made a joke about it, where she did like 1,000 movies that that only appeared on like one network, and she was always being beaten in them. Candace Cameron, something similar, where she did a lot of television. She was very, very busy. She also took a hiatus from acting to focus on her family. So I would say most people who came out of this isn't one of those, Star Wars experiences where, someone comes out of it and completely ruined their acting career.
No, and then you have Jodie Sweetin.
Well, Jodie Sweetin had other problems. We'll talk about that.
But this was when this was announced, there was a chance for all of us fans of Full House to kind of take a breath and go, man, this would be a lot of fun to see this come back, because we're always seeing we're in the era of remakes where nobody has an original idea anymore. So what they do is they take a concept that worked in the past with a fan following, and they set it in the present day with new actors and a new setting, and basically just mirror the show in kind of name and some of the premise only. And it pisses a lot of people off, because why do you need to remake Perfect Strangers and make Balki, instead of being from somewhere in the Middle East like Mipos, you have to make him, Asian to reflect some type of modern day issue or whatever? That's, first of all, nobody wants to see anybody but Bronson Pinchot play Balki. Second of all, you're taking the fun out of it. It's not meant to be politically accurate or it's meant to be funny and just stupid fun that you can laugh at for 22 minutes out of a half an hour, okay? And so we've seen those with movies, television, all these things revisited. Instead of doing that, what they did here was they tried to take a premise of a show that people loved and enjoyed and have fond memories of, and instead of reinventing it and casting new people, they decided to do basically a sequel, inverting the premise to a certain extent, and being, I don't want to say faithful because that's the wrong word, but being kind to the original show and the original cast and actors, and kind to the fan base that made it so successful, to the point where when it was canceled, it was still number 25 in the Nielsen ratings.
So one of the things I wanted to bring up was this was the cornerstone of the TGIF on ABC, as I recall. And I remember, I've said many, many times on a variety of shows, one of my favorite shows of all time is The Wire. Keep it in your pants, Pat. Relax a moment. I love The Wire for its gritty realism. I enjoy shows that sort of blur that line between fiction and reality. But I think you still have to make, even for someone like me who likes that sort of thing, you still have to make room in your life for the absurd. Something that is just pure, unadulterated fantasy. And comedy has one job: it should make you laugh. And I think that's where the success of Full House really comes from. Is because people use the words cheesy, or overacted or whatever, but it ultimately made people laugh and was entertaining. Dave Coulier was funny on the show. John Stamos was funny on the show. The kids were legitimately funny on the show. And that's where the success of Fuller House comes from. So let's go ahead and make that transition. Going into it, I was a little, first of all, like I said, I wasn't necessarily interested in watching it originally, and then Pat sort of talked me into it, and I'm glad I did now, because I was very afraid that what was going to happen here was I didn't realize that it was going to just be focusing on DJ, Stephanie, and good old Kimmy, and their progeny. I thought it was going to be yet another, we're going to have Danny and Uncle Jesse and everybody back in there again. And, and you do in little bits and pieces, but I thought they were the focus of the show. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, not again with this. They've had their time. And it's funny because that's the first show, is this reunion where you get everybody on there, and it's just literally one introduction after another. It was like the opening ECW tag team medley. Character stage left. Everyone cheers for 5 minutes, and then and then someone comes in after that, and then they're all sitting at a table, and you're a good 20 minutes into it before a plot develops. And then the show starts to find its legs and its rhythm, its identity at about the third episode. So just talking about the first episode, and we're gonna cover the whole 13 episodes here tonight instead of breaking this over a couple of shows. We're gonna talk about the whole run here. So it feels like I'm rushing. That's kind of why. But let's talk about that first show for a moment. It was fun to see the characters back because I hadn't, like who the hell keeps up with any of these people? Like I saw Bob Saget do his thing a little ways back, but it's been a while since I've seen him since, except for maybe his roast on Comedy Central. So it was fun to see the characters kind of come in, but that's all they do for about 20 minutes, like I said, is just get introduced and interact. And it's a little forced. It's a little hackneyed. Though I thought the high point of that episode was actually addressing the elephant in the room, which is, where's Michelle? And they go, she's running her fast fire. And they all mug to the camera and break the fourth wall. It's something that happens throughout the series periodically. I mean, we're not talking Deadpool here, but they occasionally will break the fourth wall and do a Michelle bit or something like that, or acknowledge the previous show, Full House. And it's funny when they do it. It doesn't feel forced. It feels natural. And if nothing else, and maybe it's I've gotten older and I laugh at things more than howl at the moon like I used to, but I giggled. Mission accomplished. Let's talk about that for a bit. What did you think of the very first episode with everybody sort of running into view of the camera?
The first episode was a no-win scenario in a couple of ways because you're having to not only try to set this new premise for the new show, but you have this, prior 8 seasons of history and the 21 years in between that time to acknowledge what's gone on exactly. So you're taking on a very tall order for a show that's meant to be roughly 30 minutes per episode. And the pilot episode of a show, when you watch it back, is always the roughest one to get through, really no matter what it is most often. Even if I break out my Full House Season 1 DVD and I watched our very first show, the name of that pilot takes some getting used to too, and it's kind of the low point of the series in a lot of ways. But it has to be that way, and I think people who write shows off at the pilot aren't always being a fair critic of what's gone on unless it's absolutely awful. And there's enough in this if you are any pseudo familiarity with Full House in you, in addition to being open to the new show. I think it takes on a very tall task and does an okay job of trying to set everything up. And, you were the one to point out, it really takes about 20 to 25 minutes into the episode to actually get to the point of what the new show is. But this was a show that was pretty much developed for fans of the original series because they felt like the market of those was strong enough that you would hook those people in addition to the majority of people of that age group that grew up and loved the show now have kids and are looking for not necessarily just a family-friendly show, but a show they can watch together with their kids, which is kind of hard to do these days. And, Mark, you're a parent. You know that finding bonding time gets progressively harder each generation because of how things move like technology, where now you'll have your kids sitting in the same room with you, and instead of talking to you, they'll send you a text message or send you a Skype message on an iPad. And I think that was kind of the goal behind this.
Okay, since you brought it up, let me say one of the pet peeves I have in life, and I have yelled at people on Facebook for this, is that if you live in the same house, you should not be communicating through Facebook. Now, it's one thing, like I send my wife a recipe or an article about teaching and say, hey, check this out, because I want her to read the article or I want her to see the recipe and feed my fat ass. But if you are having a legit argument, okay, if you're having some sort of problem in your relationship, I shouldn't see in your Facebook feed, blah, blah, blah. Next person, oh, yeah, well, it's because of blah, blah. No, you're in the same freaking house. Go talk to one another and turn off the damn computer.
You're not going to get any argument from me out of that. But, again, I think part of the mentality behind Netflix's idea to go ahead with this, and I know John Stamos was EPing it too and kind of had a lot to sell on that. I think that's one of the strengths of what this show is marketed for. because you have a joining of the past generation of characters who these people have become emotionally attached to, and the new characters who are more relatable to, you know, the kids who are going to be likely watching the show with the parents, if that's such a case. Or if you're just a crazy loner like me who grew up and loved the show, you'll watch it yourself and enjoy it either way. But I think a lot of that has to do with it, and I think it's a strong point. But again, you have to spend that time establishing what's going on exactly, and it's a very, very hard uphill battle to do that. And I don't think they do a great job with it. I think they do an admirable job with it. They try. There's effort there. I think it absolutely takes too long for the actual premise of the show to develop. But I think they really want to try to win over those, you know, people looking for a taste of nostalgia. And they spent a lot of time on the past characters like Danny, Joey, Jesse, Rebecca, who are not going to be the regular fixtures on the show. And I think they did that to try to win over that audience rather than immediately push all those characters out and people say, wait, Stamos isn't in this a lot? No, I'm not watching.
Yeah, you make a very good point, because here's the thing. You're not really going to draw people in necessarily with starting off with DJ, Stephanie, and Kimmy, especially the Kimmy character, you know, from what she was in the first series and to what she is in this series, which we'll address in a few minutes. But you got to hook people with John Stamos, Bob Saget, and Dave Coulier, and to a lesser degree Rebecca Laughlin, is that her name?
Donaldson Katsopoulos.
Okay, Jesse's wife. So you know those are the people who your magnets, but because the show isn't based around them, you know, so you got to throw them out there, give them a lot of camera time, because you're not going to see them again for a while. But that was sort of the bait to get people in. One of the things you said that I want to address really quick is I talk about this on these two elements a lot, and that is one, that's the long tail, and that is, you know, it used to be large swaths of the populace focusing on very, very, very few lanes of entertainment. You know, there used to just be the radio and the family sitting around the radio, if you can, you know, even picture that. And then there were the three national television networks, and really what people saw was most of the nation sort of were watching the same things at the same time. In the 21st century, with the internet, you know, and the advent of streaming media, what you have are very small niche markets that go on ad infinitum. So
would you say it's almost like whatever happened to predictability, Milkman the Paperboy, and the evening TV?
Yeah, I've been asking myself that question all day, as a matter of fact. But yeah, you have an infinite amount of niche markets now, and one of those markets is that, you know, an 80s or 90s nostalgia act. The other thing is Netflix is in the business now of new content, and they have to keep churning things out because they're not going to they're only going to go so far on just, you know, the quote unquote rental
recycled
market.
Programming. Yeah,
right. They got to create new content, and I say this to you guys offline in our chat, and I'll say it now. Intellectual property and licenses is always the way to go if you want the biggest audience you can find, because you never know with an original idea if you're going to hit it out of the park or not, and it's a huge gamble. However, 9 out of 10 times, if you can take something that people already knew and already have an affection for, that's already built in, you're probably 9 out of 10 times going to have a hit on your hands. So Netflix goes to Marvel, and they take, you know, Richie Rich and Full House and, you know, and all
and
these
hit
things
movies. The kid markets. You look at stuff, cartoons they've done, like Dawn of the Croods and Turbo and all this stuff.
Right. What you have there is all licensees and intellectual properties that people know and people like and already have a built-in audience, and voila, you have a success. So it's not hard to imagine that not among the critics hate this show, but we're talking one of the lowest rated shows of the year on Rotten Tomatoes. But the fans love it. You know, we'll talk about that at the end of the show. We'll get into some of the Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb scores. Finishing up with the first episode, getting back to that and establishing, like, okay, here's the old guard. Now let's transition to the new guard. Very, very fast, you have DJ sort of having a meltdown and basically saying, you know, like, oh, I'll try to do it on my own. What so people understand what we're talking about if you haven't seen it, so I don't know why you're listening to this then, is spoilers. Much like the first series, DJ has kids, was married, it is now widowed. The father has died tragically. He was a firefighter. And
his name was Fuller, hence the name Fuller House.
Get it? So what you have here is DJ overwhelmed with 3 children. She has a what appears to be a 3 to 6 month old baby, and she's got two other sons. So she's got 3 sons altogether, and she's overwhelmed. And what's happening here is that everyone is moving to LA, moving out of the house, etc. And what they decide is that Kimmy and Stephanie are going to stay in the house with her and help her raise her kid, and that Danny Tanner is not going to sell the house anymore and let them live there. And he goes off to Los Angeles. Jesse and Rebecca go off to Los Angeles, and Dave Coulier goes off to Vegas, leaving those 3 with the children in the house. And that's episode 1. Real quick, what were some of your thoughts about sort of transitioning to the new cast? What were some of your thoughts about the focusing around DJ and whole Candace Cameron being able to shoulder this show? Because a lot of this is personality driven. You identify with Danny. You like Danny. Danny was everyone's dad. And Uncle Jesse, as he says later on in the series, he's everyone's uncle. If Candace Cameron's not really able to sort of capture that and kind of carry the show on its shoulders, it isn't going to be very successful. So I was curious as what your thoughts of this actress, this character, sort of being the centerpiece of the show.
I think the thing that is her strength here is that she is a mom in real life. She did feel at times overwhelmed because her husband, for those who don't know, is Valeri Bore, who is a professional hockey player and constantly on the road and traveling and not at home, going away games until the season was over. And that's why she cut down on her acting career. She eventually became kind of more public, and for the past few years, she's been a guest host on The View. Or not a guest host, but a regular host, I should say. But, she's kind of molded herself into very much a real-life version of Danny Tanner, where she's a very normal mom who people can relate to and see their mom in to a point, or at least who they wanted their mom to be. And I think because she's not biting off such a big part or such a big departure from herself, she grounds herself in the part well enough to me, at least in the get-go, to keep me interested.
Anything left on the first episode? It moves almost painfully quickly. When it sort of stops at a halt to give you sort of time to recognize that this is the DJ show, and and it's her struggles that are going to push this thing. Stephanie was fun, and doing the. I was going to bring that up later, but as the show progresses, is what I noticed it as a matter of fact. But yes, Stephanie's sweet and matured quite greatly over the years. Actually, before we start talking about the first episode, one thing I want to bring up is I used to hate the Kimmy Gibbler character. She was kind of the Urkel of the show, and I hate that sort of nosy, awkward, ridiculous neighbor who, if anyone really acted this way, you'd call the cops on them frequently. But she even reprises a lot of those old quirks right in the very first episode, like putting your feet on the table and all of that. And it's like, oh, your feet stink. And I'm like, oh my God, is this what I'm in for 13 episodes? Well, no, because Kimmy Gibbler actually turns into a hell of a performance throughout the rest of the series. It doesn't start off well, but about episode 3, things start to pick up steam for almost the entire cast. But your initial impressions of Stephanie and Kimmy there. Because again, I thought Stephanie was fine, but Kimmy almost instantly grates on you, and you're like, oh my God, no change from when she was a kid. And then, like I said, 1 or 2 episodes later, she becomes a fully formed human being that actually works in the show, I thought.
if there's a weak link character from the first series, you can point to Stephanie, because as soon as the Olsen twins got old enough to walk and deliver lines and be cute, Stephanie became not just your classic TV middle child, but your real-life middle child, where she's not the oldest and dating and doing all that interesting stuff first. She's not the young, cute one spouting off the funny catchphrases anymore. She's the annoying middle child who doesn't have anything good going on, and her main plot lines involve her whining about something.
Right. Sort of the, what is it, Jan Brady of the bunch?
Yes, exactly. Yes. So that's who she is, and at least in the first episode, her character does not really retain any of those traits, and show that you can grow up out of that eventually, because had she kept that same exact character going into the new series, that may have been enough to drive me off.
Yeah. Thankfully, they're not reprising their childhood characters.
No matter how low-cut her shirts were.
Give me 30 seconds here on Kimmy Gibbler.
Andrea Barber is fantastic. Did enough of invoking her old character to keep you interested, but then as the series progresses, so does she, and shows a lot of range as an actress.
Yeah. All right, let's get into, now, out with the old characters and in with the new. We'll talk a little bit about the kids now, because they're the big focus of the second episode. Unfortunately, the second episode suffers from the fact that they have to now catch up from the first episode. The first episode, I don't want to use the word wasted, but the first episode spends so much time on the reunion, the nostalgia, just sort of setting up this world again, that not a lot of plot was established. It was just basically DJ's overwhelmed and her sister and her best friend are going to come help her, and that's all you need to know. So the second
episodes 1 and 2 of the new series are basically a rehash of the original series pilot, because this plot, at least revolving around the kids, is taken almost directly from the first episode of Full House.
The girls moving into the same room?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is why I want to talk about Kimmy Gibbler and her daughter, and then her estranged husband, who I have a lot of thoughts on. So, and we'll get to DJ's kids in a second. But here's where we get to know a little bit more about what happened with Kimmy and her life. And I mean, we met the daughter, I think, and the husband in the first episode, but you get to see a little bit more of them in the second. Yeah. They're more established in the second, and they become pivotal characters, especially towards the end as the series continues. So I'm not a huge fan of her husband, the character at least. You know, I'm not saying he needed to be a Toto or anything like that, but for God's sake. Setting the Hispanic community back at least 20 years, that character is. However, the daughter, I think, is one of the highlights of the series. I really enjoyed the daughter. I have to say, her and Michael Campion, who plays the eldest son, did a really great job of not being grating, terrible child actors. They were charming. I thought the episodes that revolved around them weren't the kind of nails on the chalkboard sort of acting where like you just want to strangle the character. I actually thought that both of them did a really good job of holding up their ends of the shows when the focus was on them, especially Sunny Nicole Bringus, who plays Ramona, whose character is basically trying to figure out, her role in this new home. Her mother is dragging her into this house with these semi-unfamiliar people, and this is all
the whitest family in America.
The whitest family. That was a great line. That I laughed hard at. For those who missed it, because we're talking over each other, yeah, she's like, "You're making me move in with the whitest family in America," and dude, I had to pause and I was laughing so hard. But I think she does a really good job of portraying a character who is sort of, one, struggling with the breakup of her family, and two, having to move in with this other family that she doesn't know if she's going to fit in with, and she already has sort of a negative relationship with the eldest son, and they have a whole arc in their relationship as well. So that was an unexpected twist that I didn't see it coming, and it was something I really enjoyed as the series progressed. I enjoyed the interactions between her and the mom, her and Kimmy. I enjoyed her as a character. Hated Ramon. Oh boy, just by the end of it, I was like, well, I'm sorry, Fernando.
You're
by the
racist.
end of it, I was Ramon, Fernando, Giuseppe, and whatever.
They both clean my pool. It's no big deal.
Yeah, I hated Fernando. People enjoy him, people love him, and they're like, oh, he's such a great character. That's fine. Different strokes, and move the world, as they say. But he was just. First of all, the transition from him from the beginning to the end just seemed like it came out of nowhere. It seemed a bit forced. And number two, he was just he had the same problem as an actor that Elias Harger has, who plays the middle son. And that is, I feel like the director at some point just gave up with directing some of the actors and just said, just fucking scream your lines, okay? Scream into the camera with all your might, and it'll be funny because you're a little kid and you're a poppy Hispanic dude, and it'll be hilarious. God bless America.
To be fair to Max, at least in a 5-year-old boy who can easily be excited about virtually anything, him being loud and jumping up and looking for attention kind of makes sense.
Sure.
A Hispanic hairdresser turned Formula One racer or whatever cars he races, who is a constant cheat on his wife. Why do you need to be so loud and so ethnic?
I feel like he had a different part. He had a different character, and the actor is just terrible. The director is like.
I feel like he's one of those guys who's a career bit part player, and finally gets an opportunity, and just sees it as something to launch a character he may have come up with on his own in his spare time that he used in some type of improv group, and this is the time to launch that character and make it a brand, like Andy Kaufman with Latka.
Yeah, or as you mentioned before, Joe's Balky. Just like here, when you're on screen, make sure you shove every other actor who's standing around you out of frame and just be fabulous. I feel
Chew
like
that scenery up like you are David Caruso.
Yeah, he's just he's the only Muppet on the show. Everybody else is at least somewhat channeling a real person. He went full Muppet on this thing, and he only gets worse as the series continues. It's so weird because I like the story. I mean, the idea of an estranged husband and wife sort of finding that romantic spark and getting back together, and and the doubts of about the person's personality and everything was fun. I was interested in how it all got resolved by the end. I just had to deal with his stupid personality.
It's a well-crafted arc, and, for me and you, we're both big pro wrestling fans, but neither one of us could ever stand Ric Flair as a performer. And it's like the whole when they did the whole Elizabeth was mine before she was yours thing with him and Randy Savage, it was an interesting storyline, and it was really well thought out, but it sucked to me because it was Ric Flair involved.
Right. Who's another person who obviously wrestlers aren't taking direction for the most part. They are now, but that's a whole other podcast. Back in the 90s where they were doing that story with Ric Flair and Randy Savage, you didn't have someone giving the wrestlers, acting direction. You just let their personality, a wrestler's personality, a lot of times if it's successful, is themselves turned up to 20. And unfortunately, the guy playing Ric Flair's personality turned up to 20 is kind of like when you wake up in the morning, you've slept in an almost pitch black room, and someone kicks open the freaking blinds, and it's blinding sunlight. You're like, my eyes! You have to adjust, and you're bumping into the walls and stuff. Well, that's Ric Flair's personality to me. It's just like, again, he's just gay and fabulous, and and his penis is right there in your face. It's like, hello, this is all me, folks. Hello, Like, oh, turn it down a bit. Just turn it down a notch. Yeah, you're at about a 10. I need you at a 3. So that's that character. People listening to the show going, he just compared him to Ric Flair and said something about penis. I don't understand this podcast. All right, moving on. So episode 2, like I said, is more of the family sort of gelling and really the show trying to find its legs. Episode 3 is, like I said, where I think things finally where the show finally starts to find a rhythm. It starts to find an identity, and the characters are finally allowed to breathe and sort of experience the show, as it were. I don't know if people get what I'm talking about here, but when you spend the first 2 episodes and everything is set up, introducing character, and there's not a lot of time for plot, episode 3, you finally have a time to tell a story. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end to it.
And you get depth in the characters that changes them from who they were from 1987 to 1995 to who they are now.
Yeah. We also have a guest appearance by David Coulier, who comes in as the babysitter.
And does what we were complaining about not 10 minutes ago. And fixes it.
Right. One of the things that's nice about his appearance is that he says and I'll say this about the entire show. Actually, I thought the show was an interesting window into modern society, and I don't mean that again, this isn't The Wire, but I do feel like for a canned laughter sitcom, I thought that you did though get a sense that this could be real life. That these were real people dealing with real issues. And it doesn't always have to be something very heavy. Dave Coulier brought up a very good point. He was like, I came here to have fun with you kids, and you're all on screens of some sort. I think they're on phones or laptops or tablets or whatever, and none of them are interacting with each other or him. And he finally just takes them all, hides them, and they end up getting into shooting water guns and silly string at one another. And it's a bonding moment for the kids with each other, but it's also an opportunity for him to bond with them. But really, the whole thing, it's sort of an editorial on that losing that sense of being able to develop person-to-person relationships because we're so caught up in playing on the internet, says the guy doing a podcast.
But if we're advocating for people to get along, then damn it, we're doing it for the right reason.
I get a reprieve. I got a wife who's sleeping, 2 kids who are sleeping. Who am I supposed to play with right now? I'm playing with you on the internet, so it's all right. But generally speaking, get out, get fresh air, people. For God's sakes. No, but I like that. I like that the show didn't need to hit you over the head with a frying pan with a lot of this stuff, but it took time to sort of address these modern quirks of our society.
But you don't need a major situation to, get people interested or make a point. It just has to be something everybody can understand.
And I think this is sort of the plight of a lot of parents is, how do you relate to your kids and develop, peer-to-peer, person-to-person family relationships when your competition is the internet. And access to the internet now is so easy that I have almost a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and both of them know how to at least minimally work an electronic device like that. My son was sick today, and he somewhat knew how to work the iPad just enough to get Mickey Mouse to play. So Mickey Mouse's Clubhouse. So that's the world we're living in, and it took a little time to address that. The other thing is you have the bonding. You have a parallel bonding thing where you have Stephanie, Kimmy, and the DJ going out on a night on the town, and they see Fernando there, and they're picking up men, and they're dancing, and then at the end of it, you have a dance competition. This was the episode with Macy Gray, by the way, and Macy Gray has the line of the night, probably one of the best lines of the series, where at the end of it, she says, "I want a Grammy. What am I doing here?" that was again one of those moments where I like guffawed. I think I was watching it really late at night. I laughed loud enough that I might have woken up my wife. But it was fun, and again it's fun that the series pokes fun at itself. So anything on that episode where, you know, like I said, we finally have time to breathe and let the characters mingle with each other, you know, without a lot of setup.
Well, I think this is the episode, and I might be wrong, but at the end of the episode, you have this moment between DJ and Stephanie, right?
Yeah, give you a little bit more than that.
The personal revelation?
No, that's later.
Oh, is that later? Okay, then I'm thinking of. But
that's
also in this
later.
one, for fans of the original show, they probably remember that Kimmy and Stephanie were constantly at odds with each other and never got along for anything.
Right.
But at least now, as adults, they're maturing the characters where they'll still take little digs at each other here or there, but they can acknowledge that we're adults now, we're both friends, and we're moving on. And this episode, probably more than any other episode, you really see them turning into the roles of John Stamos and Dave Coulier in the original series, where you have not a sibling-in-law, but a sibling who is more about partying and going out every night and having fun, trying to transition into the role of a guardian, and the other one who's the best friend of the lead widowed character, who is a little bit goofy and strange, but at the same time is feeling those same growing pains. And getting a night out together kind of lets them bond over these shared things, and it's a development that they didn't really go to in the original series for a while. So it's kind of nice to see them start with that, especially given the history of the characters involved.
I think this is good as any time to address one of the issues people have with this show. We were talking about this offline. There are several negative reviews of this show that go something like, "This isn't a family show. They advocate drinking, and there's sex, and later on there'll be a lot of man on man and female kissing." Oh boy, where have we gone since Roseanne? But you know, I mean, it's look. I'll skip ahead for a moment and talk about the man on man kiss that happens. And just say it was funny when it happened. All the actors had fun with it. It wasn't sexual in any way. It was more cartoonish than anything else. Think, you know, Bugs Bunny sort of, or like a Pepe Le Pew cartoon. You know,
first thing I thought of in the head.
Yeah, you know, and the character like kissed the cactus or a horse or something. It was that sort of thing. You know, the two male romantic characters for DJ go in for a kiss on DJ. DJ dives out of the way and they kiss each other. But people complained about that. But that comes later. They also complained a lot about the amount of quote unquote drinking that goes on in this series. This isn't Cheers, people. This is a handful of episodes where you have someone who, and this is where I was going with this, you know, they could have written DJ as very uptight, you know, and unwilling to unwind. And there's a lot of those kinds of characters throughout the history of television, you know, the person that just never lets their hair down. And then when they finally do, they're like a maniac. You know, think something along the lines of Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. You know, he's always up, you know, science, and blah, blah, blah. And then I think they've had him drink in a few episodes where he can't control himself after that. There are even better examples than Sheldon or that sort of thing. But, you know, they made DJ a normal human being. You know, she's got responsibilities, and she takes being a mom very seriously and being a vet very seriously. And she's had some shit happen to her recently. But she's not the Borg. You know, she's not an android. And when her sister and her best friend say, "Hey, you got to let your hair down," hey, look, we have a character who does remember what it's like to go out and have a good time. And this, for some odd reason, is rubbing people the wrong way. There's the bachelorette party later on in the series, and there's something else. And you never want to see DJ get out of hand. I mean, all of DJ's mistakes that she makes in this series, she makes quite sober. You know, we aren't talking like she gets into a car and runs over a nun or some shit like that. She goes out, she dances, she drinks, she goes home, and she's a little loud, and so are the other two people with her. And then the show ends. That's it. And this caused people to write angry reviews on IMDb going, this is not for children.
You know what the thing is? I think those people who are doing that, have romanticized the original show in their minds, maybe they watched it during the original run but never watched its reruns or remember the show as it was. When, things like in the very first pilot episode, John Stamos has a girl he talks about meeting at a strip club, and she comes to the house to hook up and basically bang him there, and it gets put off, but the implications are clearly there and stated.
Right.
There's a ton of stuff where John Stamos is out trying to pick up broads and brings broads home, stuff like that, but they don't want to acknowledge that. That didn't happen. You're talking about something else, not my show. But that's what went on. In this one, it's much, as you pointed out, much more realistic, and B, they're not doing anything so horrible that real people don't do every day, including good parents and honest people who just need a night out to unwind, get a babysitter and call a cab. I mean, you're a parent. You can't tell me there's never been a time where you and Melissa decided, let's have a night of it, and you go out to a nice restaurant, and you throw back a couple drinks, and listen to some music, and have some fun, and you got somebody watching the kids, and you don't drive under the influence, and if you're going to be under the influence, you call a cab or an Uber, which they even reference Uber in the show, which is a surprise as to how modern it is, but it's correctly referenced in the show, and this is the kind of stuff people get on, and B, I think you've got a lot of people who, based on Candace Cameron being a very outspoken Christian, they want to challenge anything she does that is not entirely out of the Bible. I myself identify as a Christian just like Candace. I can't tell you anything she's doing that it smites people who believe in God and would be so damaging to the cause of how she's representing Christians. Well, A, she's playing a part. She's not actually Candace Cameron. She's DJ Tanner. B, she's done nothing to mock Christianity or make a joke out of it or insult it or anybody who is a worshiping Christian. So they need to take this holier-than-thou attitude, which unfortunately a lot of Christians have, and transfer it into looking at the positive aspects of the show rather than wanting to condemn it because Jodie Sweetin's outrageous low-cut shirts are there, or that Candace Cameron's character has a shot of tequila and dances, not in a provocative way.
All right, since you brought it up, I was going to wait until the
I brought it up a few times.
You have brought it up a few times, so let me address the boobs in the room. I was going to wait until the Mad Max episode, just 2 ones later, but I'll just say it now. I feel like there was also a direction choice that was made in this show, which is, hey, if the action gets a little low or it gets a little dialogue heavy, just square in on Jodie Sweetin's boobs and make sure she's dressed in something that shows them off proper. That is a constant thing throughout this, and I noticed it very early on because I don't know about you, but I don't sleep fully dressed, and I surely don't come to the breakfast table in my work outfit. Now, granted, my work outfit is nurse skivvies, but that's a whole other situation. The point is, I don't come fully dressed, head in, nails done, and in my work clothing at the breakfast table with nowhere to go. And it is established early on that she was a touring DJ, and then when she stopped doing music to do this, she had there was nothing for her to do. She was basically staying at home and, watching the baby and just helping DJ out wherever she could. And that's a constant point of reference throughout the series that she has no money now. But the point of it is she shows up to breakfast and she's wearing this thing, and it's just like if it had been in 3D, her boobs would have knocked your eyes out. I'm like, what the fuck? Why would you dress her that way? Have her, come to the breakfast table, you wear your pajama bottoms and a T-shirt or some shit, and which is how she showed up in the first episode, with pants and a T-shirt. But every episode since then, like, it was like the costume people must have been like, Jodie Sweetin? No, we have to dress you in all these crazy outfits. And I'm not saying she looks like a clown or anything, but it's you look at it, Kimmy had a look. She's wearing scarves that are like pizza or ice cream or something.
Bacon and eggs.
Bacon and eggs. She had a very specific look to her. The kids look like modern kids. The middle child always looks like he's a Baptist preacher in some of these episodes. But whatever. That's his look. He's a nerd kid. And then and Candace Cameron looks like 40-year-old woman. Great, that's what she is. And then they have Jodie Sweetin, who looks like who runs the gamut where she's wearing like I said, low-cut shirts and and low-cut dresses, things that are just constantly showing off her chest. And I was just like, was that the choice maybe, or was this where the director was going with this? It was like, hey, we don't know about if this show is going to sell very well, so what's going to be a great selling point? Jodie Sweetin's tits. That's what we'll name the show. Fuller House. Jodie Sweetin featuring Jodie Sweetin's tits and Candace Cameron. All right. Well, I'm not going to complain about it, but I'm not going to I can't not talk about it either. It was a feature of the show. We got a family, a dog, and boobs. That's what's going on in this show.
I mean, we talked about, people who are unsure of how things have fit. Jodie Sweetin has not really acted much since the demise of Full House. She did an odd episode of a TV show here or there. Like, I remember her on Party of Five, I think it was, one time. An episode of the all too short-lived, Lawrence Brothers vehicle, Brotherly Love. And then kind of disappeared and had a lot of unfortunate personal issues that arose in her life, like many of us have at certain points. Drug addiction and some bad marriages. And she's pulled herself together, and credit to her. But I think there may have been a thought process somewhere that I don't know if she can act or not anymore. What does she bring to the table? And then they went to a casting session with her, and they managed to see what she had to bring to the table. And they said, well, there's an old adage to hide the negatives and spotlight the positives, as Paul Heyman would say when he talked about ECW's production values. And they decided that what she brought to the table was Hello Cleveland. And they just were going to ride it full blast.
Yeah. I'm hoping this thing got renewed for a second season, and I'm hoping they actually not to dress her down or anything, but just I hope they realize the girl can carry her part just fine. She can interact with the characters believably. We don't need to be hello. I'm Stephanie Tanner, and and just throws her boobs right out on the table. There we are, folks. That's what's going on here. Jesus Christ. I want to talk a little bit more about her when we get to, her big reveal when we get to that episode, which is coming up shortly. But before that, we have one that focuses on the kids again. We have Ramona, who is this is episode 4, the Not So Great Escape. We have two things going on in this episode that I really liked. You have this bit where Ramona is adjusting to being in a new school, and and the poor girl. Her parents are broken up. She's moved into this house with the with these very white people. Whitest family in America. And so there's a lot of readjusting going on for her. And then on top of that, she's got to go to a new school and meet new friends. And she's just about had it. So she gets Jackson, who is the eldest boy, to create a diversion for her to escape from the school. It's one of those things where there's a lot of time putting those two together and building a relationship between them. But it leads to something that I thought was great, which was you have in Kimmy Gibbler a character who recognizes that her child is struggling and doesn't want to pile on. And so she chooses to not punish the child, even when she does something ridiculous, which is, to get herself suspended from school. And she does it in the presence of DJ, who, isn't, her kids are already pretty well adjusted to what's going on. The only minor switch was the introduction of Kimmy and Stephanie. But regardless of all of that, she still says, nope, Jackson did a bad thing. Jackson needs to be punished in the following ways, and there's no discussion. And so you have a conflict of, one, ideologies, and two, between these two characters who are best friends about how to deal with their kids. Now in real life, this is sort of thing that usually ends in gunfire. Who are you to tell me how to raise my kids? Maybe
in Florida.
But But I thought it was, one, we do live in a world where people will deal with their children the way Kimmy does, with bribery, with coddling. They want to be their children's friend. And I thought it was an interesting way of looking at that issue without smashing you over the head with a chair. And the same thing with how DJ approaches it, which is she isn't lecturing in any kind of way. It's more of, you can't do that. You can't not punish your kid while I'm punishing mine. You're going to set this whole house into disarray. So just some quick thoughts here about the bonding of Ramona and Jackson, and then, this interaction between Kimmy and DJ.
Having been someone who had a surrogate third sibling relationship, had they really beat it up and tried to make these two resent each other for so long, it wouldn't have worked. It would have become very tiresome very fast, at least to a high level. But seeing these little bonding moments happen early is a very realistic portrayal of how that actually happens. And again, we talk about trying to mature these characters from who they were to who they are now. DJ still being the voice of reason makes sense. Kimmy still being kind of the goofy, nonchalant one makes sense. But you're going to evolve at a certain point as a person in those respects. And I think we see that with Kimmy with a little bit of encouragement almost from DJ, not necessarily heavy-handedness. And it's a fun nod back to who they were when they were younger, while showing them, again, as people who they are now and having to adjust to the real world. And a very real perspective of a situation that could occur where, they're in a situation where one kid is having a real rough go of it, the other's pretty well adjusted, the other one makes a gesture to help that one out. Of course, that gesture is something they shouldn't have been doing, but it's done anyway. And Kimmy's in the rock and a hard place situation where she has this poor child who is taken away from everything she knows while her parents are split up and in this new environment, which I've been in, and it's not enviable. And it's not enviable for the parent either, because they don't know how to really punish the kid, because haven't they gone through enough already? And again, This show makes sense by not going through these huge, massive things where, no, their father was not killed in Vietnam by a grenade while trying to save his entire infantry. It's very real situations that happen every day that they're just presenting a perspective of and trying to play out the full Monty of it so you can see things and make it something, again, everybody can understand. And that's the show's strength to me.
Yep. I think this is the best time to really address the Kimmy character, something I started to say at the beginning, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. And that is, in the original show, like I said, she was just a clown. She was Urkel. But she, in this one, I really like her as a character because she's not a clown as such, but she's more spunky. You know, she's got kind of a fun air to her. Not necessarily devil-may-care. She obviously somewhat knows how to take care of herself. She runs a business that appears to be to a degree successful. She's not a complete airhead. She's not a dummy. But she does have, where DJ is sort of missing that sort of zest for life, Kimmy has it in spades. And sometimes in having a zest for life, you are blind to things that, that you should be responsible for. And vice versa, when you're that stickler, that everything, when you're that type A personality, sometimes you forget that life is to be lived, and you got to find some middle ground between those two places. So I like that about her character, that they evolved her from the clown she was in the first series and made her more of a spunky character. Who loves life, but sometimes has an issue with how to be a grown-up, and sort of struggles with her passions. And I think Andrea Barber really captured that well. She hasn't done a whole lot of anything else. I looked at her Wikipedia page, and I spoke, wow, she hasn't done anything, and I heard my voice echo. That's how little she's done. But, did you get the whole echo thing?
Not this time.
All right then. But no, I think Andrea Barber does a really, really good job of capturing the essence of that character and giving it some dimension. And this episode is where you'd really start to see that. Anything else there? If not, I want to get to. We're not going to do all of these episode by episode. I want to start talking in bigger themes in a few minutes. But the first couple of episodes needed some dissection. So I want to talk about this next one real quick because there's a reveal of Stephanie that deserves some conversation. But anything else about the not so great escape and Kimmy Gibbler and all that?
No.
Okay. So episode 5, we have a friend that comes along and takes Stephanie to Coachella. And here, this episode very much focuses on Stephanie and her relationship with the boys versus her party girl former life and where she stands and what she wants and how she feels. And I'll just get right to the big reveal at the end. It's set up where the middle child, Max, has got a recital and he's afraid, and she tries to give him some words of encouragement, and because she ends up in Coachella, she's not able to be there for him, and she does something very fun and very, very nice. She talks to him while she's on stage at Coachella. She has a really funny line there. He has him play his trombone song, and then she goes like, "Hey, everyone, cheer!" And then everyone's quiet. She's like, "What are you doing? It's a child, for God's sake! Come on, people!" And everyone cheers him. And then she starts using some of his trombone in her DJing. It's a fun little thing. But the whole point of the episode is, where Stephanie stands between her life with her family and her life as a party girl and DJ, and then her and DJ Canner have a moment at the end of the show where she talks to DJ about the fact that she can't have children. And they saved it for the end so they could have a moment and the whole episode wouldn't be weighed down with this. And so I was just curious to see, what you thought of that reveal and the episode in general and how it was handled.
Again, it gave depth to a character that in some respects was lacking it. It's a good play off of the first episode when the two sisters have a conversation about, haven't you ever thought about settling down instead of flying around the world? And Stephanie goes to DJ, "Oh, well, that's boring to me." No, it's not boring. It's perfect for you, but it's boring to me. And you find out that was a defense mechanism because she had this horrible thing that she has to deal with where she can't have children even if she wanted to. And it makes the character a little more vulnerable and human, which they hadn't done really to that point enough of.
Yeah, I thought Jodie Sweetin was able to shoulder the acting very well in that scene. Candace Cameron's fine. She was fine throughout the entire series. She was pretty solid. But you're asking a character to sort of really dig deep and say, to tell you what, you should feel something when you watch TV, whether good, bad, or indifferent. The visual medium of television and film should bring out feelings. You shouldn't just be watching it numb. And I at least felt like she did a great job with it because I felt bad for her character. I as Winfrey knows from doing movie reviews, I tend to be a little sensitive with this sort of thing, and maybe brought to feelings maybe easier than some. But I legitimately felt bad for the character. I was like, that's terrible, and I could see where she was coming from, and it really drew me in. And for that little brief time, you forget it's a television show. So I thought they did a good job there. And again, they did it without being very heavy-handed.
Yeah, I agree with you all the way.
So now we're not going to talk too much about 6. 6 was an episode that pretty much just focused on Jackson and gave you, because at this point he hasn't had a lot of time on screen. He hasn't had a lot to do. He's just sort of there in and amongst the plot. So 6 is an episode all for him, which we get their version of Lucha Underground apparently called Lucha Kaboom. Actually, let me skip to this because I do remember this, and I remember I said I've got to talk about this on the podcast because there aren't too many things that are so far out of the realm of reality that took me out of the television show. Again, much like James Bond, you have to suspend your disbelief to a degree. We are talking situational comedy here, but you can go too far, and luckily the series doesn't have a habit of this, but there's something that happens in this episode with DJ and the wrestlers that was so dumb, it was so bad, that I was like, and I remember I was watching it in the middle of the night, and I said, this sounds like a good place to leave this alone and walk away from it, and I'll pick this up another day. I had enough, and that is, and somehow or other Jackson ends up in the ring with the wrestlers, and DJ runs in there and suddenly starts throwing wrestlers hither and thither, and, no one calls the cops. No, I don't know if you've ever seen a fan jump into the ring in a WWF ring, but usually the wrestlers will start kicking said fan in head. No, this particular instance, you have DJ Tanner who turns into Kalisto from the WWE and is doing Hurricane Ranas, and she does hip tosses, and then she pins one of the wrestlers, and of course, she's a hero, and they give her a name and everything, and sure,
and a contract offer.
A contract offer. And I just said, all right, I've had enough. This was, if there was a moment in this series that really jumped the shark, this was it for me. Your thoughts?
I don't really know that I can do it more justice than what you just did. It was very silly. It was over the top, not in a good way. I can't really justify seeing that and just saying, yeah, that was good, that was entertaining. It doesn't go that way with me. There's no way I can say, yeah, that was good.
Yeah, I have to imagine that's, to a degree, that's probably our just personal issue because they chose wrestling. And maybe if it had been something else, it would have been less. It would have rubbed us less the wrong way because I kind of imagine that people who aren't fans of wrestling at all, don't care, still think Hulk Hogan is an active wrestler, and well, he's a bad choice. Still think Randy Savage is alive. Saw that and were perfectly okay with it because wrestling is a stupid kid thing anyway, and so why couldn't she run in there and do it? But picture, let's do the same episode, but instead of her running into a wrestling ring, she runs in and quarterbacks for the, in the Super Bowl. It was that level of idiocy.
Yeah, or actually, if you remember in the original Full House series, had an episode where Danny was doing a sportscast for a heavyweight title fight, but he never jumped into the ring.
Yeah. It was one of those where I guess the writers thought they could get away with it. Wouldn't that be funny to see this dainty girl throwing men everywhere? But yeah, it didn't work for me. It was one of the low points of the series. That was which was again generally favorable, generally enjoyable. But I watched that and it wasn't a fast forward moment for me. But it wasn't cringeworthy as such. It was more of
I don't need to ever revisit this.
Yeah, I don't know if this particular reference is something you'll agree with because you might have actually liked the show, but it felt a little Saved by the Bell for me. It was like, oh, come on. What planet are you people on?
It drifted that far out of the realm.
So we have about 45 minutes left of our live cast here. We are going to end on time, which means we're going to talk for a little, about a half an hour more and then get into plugs and such, which means I want to talk about the final arc of the show, just sort of talk about the setups and the relationships, which is basically this. So episodes 7 through 13 is one long story that basically involves DJ and two loves of her life is one track. And then the other track is the on-again, off-again relationship of Kimmy and Fernando. And let's break these down and talk about them individually. It's why I wanted to save some time for this. first, you have the help me out here. You're the one with the lockbox for this sort of detail. You have the boyfriend from the first series who's still interested in her. His name is Steve. Right. So you have Steve, the podiatrist, who they established right from the first episode, still heart aches for her, and they have become friends, but he wants them to be more than that. On the other side, you have another character who is introduced somewhere in the middle of the series, who is the son of the veterinary clinic's owner, and him and DJ start to form a relationship. Where this goes is you have both men competing for DJ, and DJ not being able to decide which one of them she should exclusively date. Which does bring
and as we speak, my roommate has turned on Fuller House.
Okay. It does bring the question: should she even be dating exclusively? A couple of things going on here. You have a recently widowed woman with 3 children deciding to get back into the dating game, and the first question asked is, well, how soon is too soon to get back into dating when you are a single mom and you have just lost your husband?
Not a divorced situation, a widowed situation.
Right. And then how long, into dating should you settle down and try to find a one-on-one relationship? And I was like, they could have played this really stupid, and in some instances it gets a little silly, aforementioned Bugs Bunny man-on-man kiss that was talked about. But for the most part, I thought they played it pretty straight. And I thought, here you have a modern quandary for the single mom. When do you date, and then when do you become serious? When do you have these people involved with your children? And they were not so dissimilar that it was like, she could go with the bad boy, or she could. No, I would say they were cut from similar cloth. They just presented different positive qualities to her. So it really became a matter of, what does your heart say? So let's start there. As far as the next 7 episodes or so, starting with Ramona's not so epic party. What did you think of that whole storyline with DJ and the 2 betrothed men?
I enjoyed it. Because here's the thing. You're, again, tipping your hat to the original series where a lot of people were upset in the original series with the way they broke Steve and DJ up, where it kind of was never built to at any point. It all happened within a self-contained episode where DJ decided she and Steve were just not on the same page anymore. And she took a rock climbing trip and decided that's where she needs to break up with Steve. And then you don't see him again until about a year later in the series finale at that time when he shows up as her last-minute prom date. So you're tipping your hat to acknowledging.
I was going to say, they show you a flashback of that.
Yeah. Well, they show you his prom, not her prom.
Okay.
Well, again, though, they're showing the past because they've gone to 2 proms together, and I don't know what else is more serious. But with the introduction of Matt, you're showing a very real scenario where maybe you're not going to be back in love with your first love, especially after you've already both been married. You're presenting her with somebody new who offers a lot of positive qualities, maybe not diametrically opposite like what you talked about, but similar enough but different enough where she could see herself with either guy, and you're not being corny by immediately having her reunite with her first love from the original show and building no tension and having it be boring.
I did like the fact that they acknowledged that, especially towards, spoiler alert, at the end of the show, that she chose herself and that she said, you know what, I'm not ready to be in a one-on-one relationship. For God's sakes, it's been, one transition after another. I'll
say this about that. I groaned when she said that because I also grew up on a TV show called Beverly Hills 90210. Where the catchphrase "I choose me" became very popular because of a choice where the main female lead, Kelly Taylor, couldn't choose between the two male leads, Jason Priestley and oh gosh, help me, Luke Perry. And she said, "I've made my choice and I choose me. I love you both and I'm sorry."
Right. I actually remember that now that you mentioned it. Okay, I get the choice of words making you groan, but I thought look, my heart goes out to any woman who's struggling out there, you know, being a single mom and everything, and trying to figure out, especially how weird this freaking world is, you know, with I don't want to go off on a tangent, but let's just say dating can be very dicey, especially when you have kids, especially when you have daughters. I'm going to leave it at that. So to see someone struggling with that without even getting into the heavy stuff that I just alluded to, I thought it was nice, and I thought, you know, and I'm glad they didn't make her choose one of the guys. I'm glad it was funny because I was just like, God, she has a choice between, you know, dark chocolate and milk chocolate. There's still fucking chocolate here. I don't, you know, what are we choosing between? But in the end, I thought that was a good dramatic decision because, you know, they were going with I choose me part of it, you know, and saying, hey, stop trying to force this woman into a relationship she's not ready for. Well, good for you, and good for the writers.
Agreed on that.
Yeah, you don't have to
it's
be
just a choice of words.
Okay, that's fair. As far as the guys playing the roles were concerned, and first I thought Steve was a little too on the Urkelich side, you know, a little too Johnny One Note, you know, oh, I'm so lonely, you know, that sort of thing. When he goes on the date with her and it starts to go badly, and eventually just, you know, I think it's DJ who says, let's just stop being on a date and just be together. And, you know, and he's wrestling with the kids, and, you know, and this is when they do the whole bit with with Fernando and Kimmy and the Eagle. You know, I actually like that. I actually like the character in that. I got to like the character in that episode, because up to that point I was completely team the other guy.
Well, and that was, you know, it was a very organic way to like him, because nobody's really connecting with him. Even people who love the old show and liked him in the role of DJ's boyfriend, he's not bringing anything to the table in this. He's saying, hey, look, I'm single, you're single, we're just two of us talking about being single. And he's like you said, he's a one-note joke.
Right. Exactly.
But then when he actually develops personality and starts playing with the kids, and it becomes a very organic thing, and you say, oh, this is why I like Steve in the first place.
Right. And you know, and you as a viewer look at him and you go, oh, I could see him with her now, because up to that episode, I don't know about you, but I couldn't, because he kept doing the same joke. You know, he walks in and he was like, oh, you hunky man, you, and I hope you go back to Miami, and you know, like that sort of shit. And when they originally figure out that she's dating them both, you know, without the other one knowing it, he's like, well, I don't want to be in a relationship, you know, contest, and walks out the door, and the other guy walks out, and he runs back in, and he goes, we've lost him. just kidding, everyone. Like, oh, you dork. You know, like, at that point, I'm rooting for her to dump him, because it's like, no, you floppy bastard, you don't deserve DJ. Grow a penis, for God's sake. And then he does. You know, he absolutely becomes a full-fledged, you know, character in that episode, to where you have sympathy towards him, and you're at the end when she's giving out the final rose, which I thought was hilarious. Like, I'm not a fan of The Bachelor or The Bachelorette because, you know, again, penis. But for God's sake, I thought that was funny. To at least parody, you know, a show that has that has been such a cornerstone of the American television culture. I thought, I was like, good on you guys for mocking it. But I actually there was some degree of dramatic tension there, where you don't want to see the guy get hurt now, because you actually start to like him. The other one I never not liked. You know, my only thing with him was, from a dramatic standpoint of view, was he falls for her a little too fast. But again, he isn't the one who ran at the speed of light across the veterinary clinic to jump into her arms. That would be DJ. So I was like, all right, whatever.
And I don't even think that was such an out-of-character thing for them to show, because this is a woman who's lost her husband. She's been alone for X amount of time. she's going to get urges. That's going to happen. And you're sitting across from supermodel, put myself through medical school while modeling underwear guy. Really? She's not going to immediately dive into arms like that?
No, I have no problem with her doing it. I said he felt for her too fast. Was my thought.
I could see that too, but at the same time, he's alone in the city, as they establish. He doesn't really have friends or anything like that there. It's just him and his dad, who he's taking over for initially on a temporary basis. And he meets this really well-adjusted, really pretty girl who's extremely nice to him. The intensity level, maybe, but there are people who I've seen who did stupider things than that.
No argument there. Let's transition over to Kimmy and good old Fernando.
Your favorite part of the show?
Oh, yeah. So Fernando, who in the first 6 episodes is only mildly annoying, again, he's kind of the Kramer of the show, the way that he's presented. He just sort of slides in, hello, Jerry, only with a Hispanic accent. That's more or less what he's doing. He becomes a major character from Ramona's birthday on, because him and Kimmy start to reform a relationship. And now, to again, what broke them up in the first place was he cheated on her, and at that point she was like, I can't do this with you anymore, and so she left him. And he has no arc. He starts off with basically I am an impulsive dog. I can't control my urges, and you can only and I'm just in my. I know this doesn't happen, but in my mind I hear him saying, I can't stop loving women, putting a rose in his mouth and cha-chaing across the floor. That's my instinct. Just if someone were to write character Latin lover, that's the image I've got of him, and that's all he is for the most part. And then suddenly he goes from that to I want to try harder to be a good man and to be good to you and to reunite this family. And I'm like, what the fuck happened in the first 6 episodes that created this for you? And I don't even see anything in that episode itself. She's nagging him about the cake. The party itself sort of goes off the deep end, when they lose the electricity and stuff like that. And it appears, everything else just appears to be very much physical. Like, I don't see it changing him as a character as such. And then from that point on, he's just trying to win her back. And I'm like, it was the only failure of writing I saw. Like, they wrote the DJ thing really, really well. And then the Kimmy thing, I was like, this just feels forced. And
I think they thought.
The only reason why it didn't completely annoy me was because Andrea Barber held up her end of that, and she played off him really well. And and then they would periodically bring Ramona in the hopes, I hope my parents get back together, and that drew me in. But him as a character with nothing going on around him that made him do the things that he were doing annoyed the shit out of me. Okay, now I'm done.
I think they in their heads had it where DJ's arc is primary, which it should be, and they put so much effort into that they were looking around at other things to do. And they were like, hey, you know what? Let's just make them try to get back together.
Right. We
and
don't have enough
just
stuff
throw something at throw something at the wall and see what sticks. And what you find in these scenes, like you pointed out to, is that Andrea Barber is a really talented actress.
Yes.
And she does so well with this. What do I even call him but this overly ethnic lump? And just works around him and dances around him the way a master professional wrestler, as we alluded to before, can take a really awful professional wrestler that they're wrestling against and make a match watchable just through their own abilities. And that's kind of what Andrea Barber does here. She does a carry job, as we would call it, of taking this arc and these scenes and throwing them on her back and saying, this is on me, I'm going to make them work. And I'll be damned if she doesn't do as as well as anybody could possibly do with this useless stereotype that she's paired with.
I was thinking, as you were talking, I'm going to start referring to him now as Fandango.
No, because Fandango had a purpose.
Okay. Fair enough.
He's just awful, and Andrea Barber, who has never gotten to show this type of acting ability, is finally getting a presentation that is all her, and she's knocking it out of the park as far as I'm concerned. But she's stuck with this useless lump that she's just going to have back pains for the rest of her life for having to carry. And I think they just thought with the arc at a certain point, wow, she's doing really well in these scenes. We need to give her more to play off of. So they kind of just they don't necessarily totally drop it, because even as early as the third episode, they're making allusions to Fernando really legitimately having feelings and love for Kimmy when he doesn't want to compete in the dance contest all the way against her. When DJ tells him, you're going to break her heart again tonight, because he's dancing with the other woman that he picked up, and he pulls himself out citing a toe cramp. And you see there's some inkling there that he really does care about Kimberly. He's just an animal who can't control his impulses, like you alluded to. But they don't ever really strengthen that at any point. They just kind of just veer completely in the opposite direction and say, well, we're going to have him stop cheating and just try to win Kimmy back. And then at a certain point, maybe in season 2, you'll find out he was cheating on her the whole time or what have you. But they don't really do much of a good job in the writing aspect of pulling that whole storyline together. The only real bright spot is you get to see Andrea Barber really give a strong performance, and I was really shocked and impressed by it.
One of the things she does really well, Andrea Barber, she acts very well with her face. Now, a lot of the cast does that. Especially Elias Harger, who, when he isn't screaming at the top of his lungs into the camera, is doing a lot with his face, and he's overacting. But the character almost calls for it at times. So I'll allow it, as the judge says. I'll allow it. But she, more so I think than anybody else in the cast, uses her face very well. She does a lot of movement of her jaw and her eyes, and there's a lot of and this is very much in traditional sitcom camera direction, but you sort of say your line, you pause for laughter, and then there's another pause there to show your face, and some people handle it better than others. I could watch her move her mouth and her jaw and everything like for an hour, because between that and the movement of her eyes and and how she sort of wiggles her hips at times, I was like, wow, she's really good. She's not doing Shakespeare in the Park, don't get me wrong here, but I would say for what the medium calls for, she's got it. I would cast her in any situational comedy now, because I really feel like she captured, in essence, what you want. You want an actor to sort of act through the camera without screaming through it, without tearing up the scenery. And I think she does that very well. She's in no way understated, but she also isn't overacting either. And I would actually say that for almost the entire cast, no one really overacts in this show. Everybody has a level of where they're keeping it somewhat grounded. And
except for Fernando.
Except for Fernando. Where the show was imminently watchable. Like, I watched the show New Girl, and I like, whatever you think about it, I like New Girl. I laugh at it. But there are times where the characters do something and I have to fast forward to it because it's so ridiculous. It's beyond nails on a chalkboard. What's the word everyone uses? Cringeworthy TV. It goes beyond that. I don't understand how people act this way. There's not that much. I was fearful going into Fuller House. There's going to be a lot of that, and I was going to have to fast forward through a lot of this. There was only one thing, and it was with the kids, where I was like, oh, this is almost unwatchable. It was the M&M's bit. Which the only thing that I thought was even mildly amusing about that was after Elias Harger, Max, eats the entire bowl of M&M's and is running around the house. But the exchanges between Jackson and Lola and all that, I was like, I gotta fast forward this. I can't watch it. But generally speaking, through the 13 episodes of Fuller House, everyone keeps the performances in front of the camera, and they're not all over the fucking place making the whole thing unwatchable, which, kudos to the director and the actors. Getting back to Kimmy and Fernando, it's interesting that, excuse me, it's interesting that they went the route of the double wedding at the end, almost cliched. It's kind of the last things I want to say about this, and then we'll do some final words and such, and we'll play my favorite game, What Did the Critics Say? But just thoughts on that. They used it almost as a setup for DJ to do her thing at the end. But boy, they spend a lot of time on the build up to the double wedding, and then and then her decision to just be spoiler alert, to just be engaged to him for however long and not rush back into a relationship with him for a myriad of reasons, not wanting to go on tour and all of that. I thought it was not odd, just it threw me that it was almost like you said about Stephanie. It was like they, or what you had said before about the Kimmy character. It was as they're writing it and shooting the episodes, going, hey, she's good. We should do more with her. And it's like, you're just pitching ideas, and when you get to let's have a wedding. I was like, how did we get here? Why are we focusing on this? So this is not this is not My Beautiful House. I would say the choice to go that route was questionable, but not necessarily bad. So your thoughts there on the finale and the whole wedding and all of that, and then I think we're gonna change gears here.
Yeah, I mean the whole wedding episode, the Dave Coulier cameo was very. I don't even know how to describe it. It just passed where it should have, and didn't really serve an overall purpose other than for cheap, corny laughs.
Right.
Again, getting back to the DJ, Matt, Steve triangle, that was handled well. The setup of the episode with both of them, of course, ending up there as her date was very well done. Because it was predictable, but it didn't bother me.
Yes, take note, TNA writers. Predictable is sometimes very good.
When handled right, and that was handled right. The Kimmy and Fernando stuff, we keep harping on it, but it really was the Andrea Barber showcase. Because despite poor rushed writing, bad overly ethnically stereotyped acting, she shines through like a light. And if nothing else, both her and the girl playing Ramona, surprisingly, really beyond expectations for a child actor. The actor playing Jackson, Michael Campion, I believe is his name. He's much more in the typical vein of a 13-year-old boy, and that's fine. He's not overplaying anything.
Just a quick review of the kids. Michael Campion is adequate. He is exactly what you want that character to be. Nothing more, nothing less. Elias Parker spent the first half of the season screaming at the camera, and the second half making I'm adorable faces. And I'm fine with it. That's the character. But the real star among the kids, and the character I want more of in the second season, is Sonny Nicole Bringus. I would actually love we could lose the whole Full House cast and just do a show about Kimmy and Ramona, and I would be perfectly happy. And the baby was cute. What do you say about baby actor?
Yeah, there's not much else you can say. The kid's kind of deformed, but in a cute way, almost like those dogs. The really ugly ones that are ugly cute. That's the kid.
Don't. He's a baby. Stop. Or they are babies.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying he's going to be an ugly kid for the rest of his life. He could turn out to be the next Chris Hemsworth for all I know, and he certainly has the size to become 6'4" and 220 pounds. But
it's a chunky boy.
Yeah. But no, Ramona's character is really, she goes from being the annoying, loud girl from episode 1, where I think they were trying to initially paint her as just a rehash of Kimmy's character. And They find out, you know what, there's a lot to this girl that we can take advantage of that maybe we didn't do the first time around with Andrea. So let's try to expand this. And you get a much more realistic character. You get a likable character. who has to convey a lot of things that, I know I had to deal with as a kid when your parents aren't together and you have to transfer schools X amount of times and make new friends from scratch. And there's maybe your mom and dad went out to get pizza while they were separated or divorced, and you're like, man, maybe this can be something. Please let this be something. Or at least if I have to have a birthday party, let them coexist for one day without one blaming the other for everything going wrong. And she does it really well. She doesn't ham it up. She doesn't come up with these needless tears and scenes. And I want to say that the three child actors in Michael Campion, Sonny Nicole Braga, and forgive me, I forget Max's actual name, but they're ahead of the curve. Elias Harger. They're ahead of the acting curve when you compare them to Candace Cameron, Andrea Barber, and Jodie Sweetin at their respective ages at that time in the development of the show. And I think that means a lot more promise for Fuller House than initially expected, despite what critics will tell you, because the show is going to be geared toward focusing on those kids more and more and less on the cameos from John Stamos and Bob Saget and Dave Coulier, where it's going to evolve into a show with its own identity that has a past. And I think that's a really promising thing to see.
Agreed. And I tell you, as those three get older, I'll definitely become more interested in the show and interested in them as we start to take away some of the focus on the adults because they're such strong actors. Again, with Sonny Nicole Bringus being by far the strongest among the three. I'm not counting the baby. So, all right, let's wrap here on the series and again get into my favorite game. What did the critics say? Overall, as I said, I liked it a lot. I was interested from the second episode on. That first episode was a bit of a struggle. I think I remember watching Full House when I was 11 through 18 or 19, however old I was in 1995, and but I was definitely 11 in 1987. I've done the math now. And I was amused as a kid. As an adult and somebody who is now, training himself to analyze this stuff for purposes of review, I think I enjoyed this one a lot more because I wasn't just passively watching. I was actively thinking about the characters and the plots and all, and how it was shot and all of that. And there was a lot there for me there was a lot of meat for me to sink into. As opposed to some other stuff where there's just nothing there and it's all fluff and nonsense and I can't really get into it. So I enjoyed Fuller House. I'm glad it got renewed for a second season, and I really applaud Netflix for, to one degree or another, taking chances on some of these intellectual properties and throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. And this one stuck. Give me 50 words here on your thoughts on this thing.
I think this is hopefully the larger start of, rather than rehashing old ideas and repackaging them, because we're out of ideas, take things that we loved from the past, pay homage to them and modernize them, and do it in a way that doesn't insult the audience's intelligence, which is the one area where Girl Meets World falls short. I think that was the prototype. I think this is the finished product, and I hope things stay in this direction.
It's a really good point, Pat. Okay, so I've been saving this one all show. Okay, I read it on Rotten Tomatoes. This comes from the Joey Marona from the Cleveland Plain Dealer, and this was actually a fresh review. Okay, not certified fresh. No, not at 32%, my loves, but this one was fresh, and it says here the show exists solely for the fans, a throwback sitcom that is unapologetically corny, silly, heartwarming, full of innuendo, often cringeworthy, and make no mistake about it, fully in on the joke. And I'm reading it for that last part, that fully in on the joke, because there's a lot of, as I said at the top, there's a lot of I shouldn't say a lot. There's plenty of fourth wall breaking and inside jokes about the series itself and the characters themselves that gave me a laugh, despite myself. And I'm glad the show isn't taking itself too seriously. Seriously enough that there's quality here, but not so seriously that it can't poke fun at itself every once in a while and have some fun.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. We can look at a show that wants to be goofy 5 minutes ago, and then now in the present they're bringing some issue to you like cancer or abortion or something horrible, and there's no balance to it. And the show has no flow, and you tune out because you don't care.
This comes from Screen Rant, Molly Freeman. Instead of giving viewers something new with the same spirit of the beloved original, the Fuller House series premiere attempts tongue-in-cheek nostalgia that does not land and ultimately comes off as more insulting than cheeky. I wish Molly had watched the whole thing and not just the first episode.
Yeah, she clearly just watched the first episode, and even that criticism is a little bit harsh.
Oh, if you like that one, then you love this from Tim Sherritt of TV.com. Fuller House is sugary garbage that might drive you to madness if you watch enough of it, which is to say it honors its predecessor incredibly well.
So he's not a fan of the original show and went into Fuller House and watched it, and for some reason thought he would be a fan of a continuation of the show he didn't like in the first place.
Yep.
Good on you.
All right, and this last one comes from the Los Angeles Times. I don't know if I read too many of these, but our last one here from the Los Angeles Times is also a fresh review. At least that's what it says here. As revivals go, it's more than usually successful and true to the spirit of its predecessor. And there are lovely performances from the new adults in the room, Sweeten especially. Well, there you go.
Hey, it's a fresh review. It's somebody with a positive thing to say.
So we're going to end on a negative one. From New York Magazine / Vulture, Margaret Lyons has this to say. She's a top critic on Rotten Tomatoes. Fuller House's great achievement is that it is not the absolute worst show in history. That cannot possibly be reason enough to make something. Oh, you have no idea, madam. So, yeah, just kind of going over the Rotten Tomato scores here. 32% Rotten, but the audience loved it. I don't have it pulled up just yet, but, yeah, listen, 79%.
The original Full House series
with 380 people rating this thing. So what you have is your typical, this isn't anything the critics are going to really get into, but it wasn't meant for them. It was meant for fans. It was meant for your casual viewing audience, and the casual viewing audience ate it up.
The original series Full House never achieved critical acclaim. It was harped on as horrible from day one. A bad TV version of 3 Men and a Baby is what the original reviews were. They were harsh on the kids. They were harsh on Coulier. They were harsh on Saget. They were calling Stamos just a pretty boy who should have stayed at soap operas. And yet the show was an unequivocal hit.
Yeah, it anchored a lot of the Friday night viewings there. Once it got
they used to air it twice a week on Tuesday night at 8 p.m. and Friday night at 8 p.m., which were important time slots at that point in time.
Yep. All right. I think that's as good as it's going to get here. We have about 10 minutes left. That's plenty long enough for us to do plugs. So, Pat, buckle in, because we've had someone who's been waiting, I think, to talk to us all night here. I think I know who this is. So I'm going to go ahead and bring on a caller, and then we'll do plugs, and then we'll get out of here. So thank you for being patient. Area code 818, you are on with our review of Fuller House.
Good evening, Mark. Good evening, Pat. This has been a wonderful show and trip down memory lane, so thank you very much. As a kid who grew up watching, TGIF, TGIF was must-see TV for me. I like how you guys are just calmly and I think fairly talking about Fuller House. And I just want to give a shout out to Andrea Barber, because I just cannot believe the way she just dives into this character again. And it's surreal because she's still Kimmy, but she's learned a few things. Like, I thought the most brilliant bit she did when she grabbed her daughter's phone and like threw it in the house. She said, well, if you want your phone and you aren't ever going to step in there, go get your phone. I thought that was brilliant, and I think the critics who are bashing this show, bashing it like original Full House was so much better. I mean, to me, they're the exact same show. It's just a little time has passed, kids are a little older. It's the same show to me. It's the same character. And I feel you guys have done a great job of breaking it down. So thank you very much, guys.
All right, thank you for the kind words, Jeff. Thanks for your insight. Always appreciated. If you only got a little smidgen of Jeff there, but you can check out Jeff's great movie reviews on 401mania.com in the movie review section. He's also, I believe, still a contributor to the MMA Zone. So that's Jeff Harris from 401mania.com. Thanks for calling in, Jeff.
Thank you.
Okay, let's get into plugs. Pat, go ahead and talk about your thing.
Well, my most recent thing is a show hosted by Gavin Napier. It is called Bunkhouse Stampede Radio. You can hear it on Gavin's Blog Talk station. You can find links to it at thecasualheroes.com, where Mark and I are frequent contributors to the WrestleCast, which we record on a semi-regular basis. You can find us occasionally on a show called The Championship Rounds, which is a boxing-based show. So be on the lookout for a new episode of that coming up. We will talk about the farce that is Khan versus Canelo, and all the other goodies around the boxing world happening.
We'll also syndicate that show here on the Radulich Broadcasting Network once it ever gets recorded and published.
He says syndicate. What he really means is steal.
Steal, syndicate, back. We're living in the Trump revolution, baby. Words don't mean anything. In any case,
don't I wish?
Yes, I do. I do occasionally appear on the Casual Heroes WrestleCast. The most recent one I have syndicated here on. I did that in air quotes, by the way. Here on the Radulich Broadcasting Network, which features a pretty picture of Alicia Fox dousing herself in orange soda. One of the best nights in the history of professional wrestling, I tell you. We talked about the most surprising modern vets in the history of the WWE. We talked about the return of Shane O'Mac. So go ahead and give that a listen.
2006.
2006. Our most recent addition to the lineup of great shows here on the Radulich Broadcasting Network is the Every Joe podcast, featuring former Freak Boy John Brodigan. And he's been wrapping up the most recent presidential primaries, giving you that GOP talk that you all know and love. So go ahead and check that out in the archives. That's the Every Joe podcast featuring John Brodigan. Of course, every Sunday we've got the MMA show with Robert Winfrey. Every Monday, which this past Monday, I was on Jesse Starcher's source material talking about the Hulk storyline, Future Imperfect. Last week, we had a good series of shows here. We did a Long Road to Ruin, the Beverly Hills Cop trilogy. We've got reviews of Deadpool, Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies, and Kung Fu Panda in the archives. We've done a Metal Hammer of Doom, Avantasia, Ghost Lights, and also Long Road to Ruin, the Shaft trilogy, which you can also hear Pat on if you enjoyed him tonight. There's more of him for you. Tomorrow night, on the Metal Hammer of Doom, we will be reviewing an album from Thrash Kings Anthrax, For All Kings. It came out last week. It's a great album.
I didn't like it.
You didn't like it?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. This Tuesday, now this just in, ladies and gentlemen, we got a new show, kind of. I don't know how often we're going to be doing it. My co-host, not dependable, but I do love her. The new Sister Hazel came out somewhere in the middle of February, and apparently they went full country on this one. They even went as far as to bring in Darius Rucker. So once I told my wife that, hey, if we ever get the numbers up on the Radulich Broadcasting Network, we'll actually start to see some ad revenue checks come in. sooner than every 6 months. And she went, oh, in that case, sign me up to help. So,
Marky Shyster.
That's me. Shyster with a dollar bill sign, y'all. So Melissa, my lovely wife, will be appearing on the first ever Country Washboard of Jubilation. Yes, you've heard of the Metal Hammer of Doom. Well, this is the Country Washboard of Jubilation, and our very first country album review will be Sister Hazel. And I'll be doing that with just my wife. So that'll be a lot of fun. The next night, we'll be reviewing London Has Fallen. That's Robert Winfrey will be back. We'll be reviewing that movie. It currently stinks on Rotten Tomatoes. It got something like a 13 or 18 score or some shit. Yeah, not
well,
London Has Fallen.
Proof. That doesn't mean anything.
Maybe. Thursday is the Metal Hammer of Doom proper, and we had to reverse a few things. But this is our annual cover show. Jesse Starcher will be guesting. We'll be playing some 20-odd covers between myself, Cooper, and Jesse Starcher, and we're titling this one Army versus Navy. Okay, we promised we'd do it last year when both of us had covers of In the Army and what do you call it, the Navy one that I'm doing, In the Navy.
In the Navy.
In the Army, in the Navy. So we decided covers 3, Army versus Navy. Every one of our cover shows that we've done so far have been hilarious. A lot of fun was had. So we hope this one lives up to the history of it. So that's 10:30 on Thursday. On the 16th, review of Zootopia, Disney's new animated feature that isn't a musical. And then Long Road to Ruin will be back with our review of the Madagascar trilogy, or as I'm calling it, Reference, the animated motion picture.
Mark, I found your next review.
What's that?
I'm on Netflix, and there's something called Marvel Superhero Adventures Frostbite.
I saw that.
In this Christmas-themed special, Captain America and the Avengers battle Loki and Ymir, who plot to steal Santa Claus's powers and conquer the world.
Oh, that's hilarious. I mean, we may have to do that in December. Real quick, I just want to wrap this up. March 23rd, we'll be reviewing Daredevil Season 2, featuring 2 new characters, the Punisher and Elektra. March 24th is the special Robert Winfrey and I are doing an In Defense of Man of Steel. And then the next night, while I'm at Batman vs. Superman, Gavin Napier and Pat will be taking over the Radulich. It's a hostile takeover, ladies and gentlemen. Gavin Napier and Pat Mullin will be taking over the Radulich broadcasting studios and bringing you the case against Man of Steel. Then we'll review Batman vs. Superman on March 30th, and in celebration of all things DC, on March 31st, we'll be on Long Road to Ruin. We'll be reviewing the animated Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and Part 2. And then I'm off to WrestleMania. So that's enough plugs for now. Pat, it's, as usual, you are a gentleman and a scholar, and it was a pleasure having you on tonight's show.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. I thoroughly enjoyed myself.
I hope so. Hope to have you on again soon when something tickles your fancy. In the meantime, to all of you who deigned to listen to us tonight and who have downloaded us later on, I thank you. Be well, be safe, and behave.
MasterCard and Visa. money,